Dolph Ziggler's WWE career is a very inconsistent tale. The one thing that remained consistent, however, was hardship. Now, I'm not gonna get too dramatic with things. The man himself doesn't even care. He does not give a damn, not to mention he's a millionaire, so at the end of the day, I'm sure it doesn't fly over his head much because he always makes a big deal about how he doesn't care about his career. That said, his career, if he was more lucky, would have gone down entirely differently. He suffered a very untimely injury at the height of his career, and despite the lack of injuries from here on, he was labeled as injury prone. Imagine being labeled as that Derrick Rose of WWE despite being healthy 90% of the time. It's well known that the higher-ups were looking for any way to move on from Ziggler as a main eventer, and this became more apparent after Survivor Series in 2014. At his most popular, WWE opted to focus on others and in turn, halt the momentum of the show off. And if that wasn't a sign that he wouldn't be a much bigger star, his placement on the card throughout 2015 certified that fact. Ziggler had a great ability to sell his opponent's moves well, made himself and others look good every single night. He could talk, had charisma, and on paper, this man should have been higher on the list. He held his own with 2010's best wrestlers, 2015 wrestlers, and even 2023 wrestlers. And there was plenty of opportunities to turn Ziggler's career around, but it was mostly overshadowed. Alright, with that said, let's get into it. On the January 3rd, 2017 episode of SmackDown, Dolph Ziggler once again lost a match. This time to Baron Corbin. Afterwards, Kalisto saved him and thanked him in the only way he could, with a super kick. And he started shouting about needing nobody. So he was once again a heel. This was the first time Ziggler was a heel since 2013, June 2013 to be precise. He threw a fit backstage and got Apollo Crews involved. The show-off didn't care who he was upsetting and a brawl ensued. Ziggler explained his actions the following week and showed about as much interest as 2017 Brock Lesnar. He then went out to face Kalisto, and a heel turn couldn't stop him from losing, as he was caught in a tough position with the crucifix and Kalisto took advantage. So he decided to attack him after the match, leading to Apollo running in for the save. He couldn't do anything as well and fell victim to the steel chair. This led to Jerry the King Lawler interviewing Ziggler and asking for his reasoning over this change of character. The King told him the goodness has faded about as much as the bleach in his hair, but despite all this talk, he wasn't given an answer to anything he was asking. The King thought that the new attitude was a way of Ziggler changing things to start winning matches. He saw last week as an example of changing his ways, changing nothing. He lost and then went off the deep end. So basically, he accomplished nothing. Instead of talking, he tried walking away. But he finally spoke. Bischoff knew that Lawler would try to make him look bad in his own hometown of Memphis, and then proceeded to show a clip of the night the King almost died. Ziggler made mention of how he hit many elbows in the chest and talked about how Lawler should have blamed him for the heart attack. He threatened him, saying to stop asking questions or he'll finish what he started 4 years ago. Cheap heat. The King comes from an old school line of wrestlers who lived for these type of moments. So, I wouldn't be shocked if it was him who even suggested it in the first place. Instead of backing off, the King asked him how does it feel that no matter how many times you change your attitude, how does it feel to be a loser? So he super kicked him in the chest. The sad part about all this is the fact that Ziggler was literally that. Not many bought into the idea that this heel turn would succeed and he'd actually move up the ranks, because at the end of the day, no matter how many changes they made with him, he's still Dolph Ziggler. The attitude change seemed to do wonders to Dolph Ziggler, as the following week he beat Kalisto in less than a minute and then afterwards tried to take him out. JBL was about to get involved, which is kind of funny, but then Apollo Crews with a chair ran in and sent him running. Next week, it was the same old story. He obliterates Kalisto, tries to attack afterwards and expose him, but Apollo Crews comes out and chases him. Since these two had a score to settle, a match was finally made between the two. This time around, Ziggler once again made a slight mistake that was capitalized on, and he lost. So it meant Apollo was getting a cheap shot. Chair shots to the back and Kalisto runs in. His momentum fades and Ziggler stands above both men. This finally got the attention of somebody else, that being Daniel Bryan, who called out his actions. Ziggler said that he could beat both Kalisto and Crews at the same time. It's just beating them with a chair is more fun. So Bryan booked a handicap match for Elimination Chamber. Dolph wasn't even that angry, he was more annoyed, which tells you the state of these two jobbers. Ziggler tried to take advantage early on with an ambush, and this worked into his favor as he took control of the match. His hold on the match was very strong and the fans didn't really care. The injured Kalisto was desperate to get involved with the match and Ziggler was prepared. Crews took advantage and the momentum shifted. They double teamed him and scored the victory. It would have been worse if Ziggler won, because these two were considered prospects at this point, and to have the ultimate mid-carder, at least in a bunch of fans' eyes, beat them would have been bad. Right afterwards, Dolph attacked both men. He put a chair on Apollo's leg and stepped right on it. It hurt so bad that he did it again. So the heel turn was complete. Dolph Ziggler was much more remorseless than in the past and finally had some sort of direction. Direction was strange, it was odd, it was bizarre, but at the end of the day, it was direction. He called this a wake-up call to the superstars of the new era. They all come from the same sad place. They think they're here to replace him, but they're not. And he was about to put them in their place. Ziggler's irritation came from a place of jealousy. He was once that fresh talent that burst on the scene with a lot of excitement radiating from him. He's the one that steals the show and they'll never change. But he was much older now, and that's what annoyed him. Apollo finally retaliated and eliminated him from the Battle Royal, but Kalisto paid the price. This distraction cost Cruz the Battle Royal, and it led to a chairs match between the two. Cruz dished out what Ziggler had been doing with the sneak attack. This match was more suited for Ziggler, whose brutal side was on full display here as he scored the victory. From here, he reverted to being a jobber as he was doing nothing of note, mostly because WrestleMania was on the horizon. He was in the WrestleMania Battle Royal, of course, but he didn't win, so there's that. On the April 11, 2017 episode of SmackDown, Dolph Ziggler came out to talk about the Superstar shakeup. He said he carried SmackDown on his back just for the Raw guys to come in. He's talking nonsense when Shinsuke Nakamura interrupted. Nakamura had just debuted on SmackDown a week earlier, so he was subjected to the main roster debut starter pack, a feud with Dolph Ziggler. The show-off was greatly offended by being interrupted, and Nakamura's aura was on full display here. This man had something entirely unique to the rest of the roster. And right when Ziggler tried attacking, it was no match. This is essential. WWE always had somebody feud with The Miz or Dolph Ziggler, especially Ziggler. Since he did it to him, Ziggler opted to return the favor and try to interview Shinsuke Nakamura. He asked about the wacky dance moves during his entrance, and Nakamura decided to stay silent. So Ziggler said that he isn't who people think he is, about how Nakamura is actually from Indiana, goes by the name of Michael, and it was some nonsense. Shinsuke Nakamura was just an alias of his. He had to run away to Japan, and Ziggler claimed that it translates to petty, pathetic, overrated freak, and this was enough. He asked him, "Hey, what is your problem?" Shinsuke called him a jackass, and Ziggler attacked. He accomplished nothing and almost took the Kinshasa, and this was a weird segment. It didn't click at all because, for one, it took up a lot of time, and this segment's biggest problem was a lack of interest. Dolph's out here telling Michael Jackson stories, and it was all nonsense. WWE was also trying to paint Nakamura as the artist, as the artist known as Shinsuke Nakamura, and was slowly making it apparent. But fans didn't really care much about Dolph Ziggler here. It was very odd, and a lot could have been done with less time. Ziggler's hatred and animosity of Nakamura comes down to doing everything right and then some, but being underappreciated. All for a guy that does a weird dance. He thought it was pathetic that Nakamura called himself an artist and had praise for himself, saying he did it all by himself without the fans. They didn't care about him then, but they surely will now. And he called out Nakamura, who had the entire crowd by his side. Ziggler wasn't about the jokes and told him that if he's gonna stand in the ring with him, he better put up or... and he took the mic away before adding, "Shut up." Shinsuke was ready for a fight, but Dolph backed off. Instead, he went for a cheap shot, but this amounted to nothing like his main event pushes in WWE. Ziggler wanted to get back at the hypocrites that turned their backs on him by beating Nakamura before he even begins. Okay. Average build. It's all about establishing Shinsuke Nakamura as a new character on SmackDown. It wasn't much from Dolph Ziggler's end. It was very generic stuff coming from him. Now, their match at Backlash wasn't as good as it should have been, at least in my opinion. Dolph Ziggler and Shinsuke Nakamura are two talented wrestlers, but on this night, I just personally feel that it didn't work. It was a solid match, but the expectations were far too high for them to actually deliver. A random match, yes, on a standalone show would have been good, but this was hyped up as Shinsuke Nakamura's first match on the main roster. The result was what you thought it was, as Ziggler lost. He did a lot of work in putting over Shinsuke Nakamura as the new babyface on SmackDown, but it didn't benefit himself much because WWE put him as this guy who was putting over talent. It wasn't a guy they were going to push hard or anything like that. Yeah, sure, he'd get rewarded every once in a while, but his job was to make others look good. From here, Dolph Ziggler failed to win Money in the Bank. He disappeared for a bit before returning on the August 22nd episode of SmackDown Live. Now, one thing to mention is that there was a big rumor at the time that Dolph Ziggler was going to be repackaged. He was excited to reintroduce himself in a backstage interview. Clearly irritated with this, he said it in a sarcastic manner. He said that while away watching Raw and SmackDown, he figured out what it takes to be a star and started going off about dancing, making himself look like an idiot. That was his plan for next week. All in all, it was a strange promo. Ziggler usually says nonsense, but here it was on a different level, and it showed that WWE didn't know what to do with him. When it came time for next week, Ziggler said that since they're in Little Rock, you can expect nothing. The reason for this change is because he's been the best for 10 years, but has nothing to show for it. He called himself a star and thought the key was anything not involving wrestling. The lights, the jacket, the woman, all that. Whatever it took to get noticed, he was gonna do it. As much as he hated it, Ziggler had come to terms that all this work he had made all these years was for nothing. So he was going to follow on the all flash, no substance statement. When it came out the following week, it was the same old story and the commentary was deflated. Ziggler went off on the fans being unsatisfied with the greatest performer in WWE history. The fans didn't want him, they wanted a dumb gimmick, so he came out as John Cena and made a mockery out of him. Randy Savage was next, and this man was about to collapse in anger out of his years of despair. And then to top it all off, he came out as Naomi. Ziggler shouted he didn't give a damn about the fans and said that they make him sick. The next week, it was the same thing. He emulated Bayley, and it was all about becoming a star, but the man hated this because regardless, sometime the bell has to ring and the performer has to wrestle. Did this man lose his mind? A long time ago, that's for certain. When the fans didn't care, he got upset. The funniest one, though, to me was the Ultimate Warrior. He just came out looking goofy, and it was hilarious. He was accomplishing absolutely nothing with these entrances because in storyline, this man wasn't even wrestling, let alone winning matches. And of course, this is the one he knew how to execute best. They all cared about nonsense. He's the best in the world, yet they have no interest in him. After he mocked The Undertaker, Ziggler was finally enjoying himself because the fans were fooled. Bobby Roode finally put a stop to this, and his entrance was the very example that Ziggler had endlessly mocked over the last couple of weeks. He praised Ziggler's wrestling skills but called him a hypocrite. He always talks about being the best, and Bobby decided, you know what, I challenge you to a match at Hell in a Cell. Bischoff made mention of everything that made the fans interested in Bobby Roode and undermined his wrestling skills. He said everyone that faces him rests in. Before he could finish, Roode said Hell in a Cell is gonna be glorious. Man, I sometimes forget how mad popular Bobby Roode was early on in his main roster run. That theme song was like the secret weapon, and coupled with how he carried himself, it was a great combination. Yeah, he should have debuted as a heel, but they could have adapted. Dolph Ziggler debuted a new version of his theme song where it cuts off and he comes out with zero charisma, zero emotion, nothing. It's basically like I'ma screw myself out of interest from the crowd. The match itself was pretty dry, there's not much to talk about. Even Dolph Ziggler losing is expected, except this time around Bobby Roode cheated to win because Ziggler tried doing it first. He zigzagged him after the match, which showed that the feud wasn't over. Dolph Ziggler's biggest problem with Bobby Roode was forcing his way into WWE, not because he's good enough, but because he had this little shtick. He also held resentment over losing in a very unethical way, so he wanted his rematch. Roode gave him his rematch and wanted to do it now. Ziggler, though, didn't and walked away. The rematch the following week had the same ending, except this time around it was Ziggler who cheated to win. So this meant they had to have a rubber match, which was 2 out of 3 falls rematch with the winner going to Survivor Series. This match was much better than their last two. These two both showed out here. Once Ziggler hit that super kick to win the first fall, they went all out. Both men had a sense of urgency to deliver on this match, and they did. It was Ziggler's first great performance in a couple of months, but you guys know how it ended. Bobby Roode victorious, and he went out to Survivor Series. As for Ziggler, he messed around here and there before focusing on the US Championship. He was added to the Bobby Roode and Baron Corbin US title match because according to him, they know how good he is, and adding him to the match makes it better. Outside of the ring, Ziggler didn't have much hopes for his character. And I quote, "Wins and losses don't matter unless you're the guy who loses every single night. And if you're that guy, then you should maybe in the dark match, not fighting someone to see who goes to the world championship the next night. And even if you do pull that rabbit out of the hat, people know that it's not long term." So as you can see here, Ziggler knew the issues with his character. He knew them down to the very core. And that's exactly what it was, because at the end of the day, as much as WWE tried teasing a potential Dolph Ziggler push, they weren't going to follow up, and the fans knew what's up at this point. They knew that Dolph Ziggler wasn't going to get a long-term push as a top talent. He knew as well. The match at the pay-per-view was pretty good. Problem was, it gets overshadowed by everything that followed. These guys gave it their all, and in a surprise turn of events, it wasn't Bobby Roode that won the title, it was Dolph Ziggler. Now, one very important thing to mention is that at this point, Dolph Ziggler was negotiating with WWE over a new contract. Ziggler himself leaned towards leaving, and I'm gonna get to that in a moment. He felt like the only way they'd give a damn about him, the fans and the higher-ups, is if he leaves. Later that week on SmackDown, the new champion held a title celebration. He said that he told the fans so. Winning the title out of nowhere wasn't even shocking. Ziggler said that he accepted every challenge coming his way for the past 12 years. Many come out here talking about how they're the most charismatic, and he doesn't need to say that. He's just the best, simply put. Ziggler showed off his accolades and accomplishments over the last couple of years, and the point is, he was one of the most decorated WWE champions in history. The fans don't deserve him. They're not worthy of his presence, and asked the fans if they want something to remember him by, and he dropped the US title, effectively relinquishing it. Why? Because there's, of course, more to it. Not much, I'm gonna get to that in a moment, except most of it is up to the imagination. The reason why I'm saying this is because even though it was Dolph Ziggler, there was a sense of optimism towards him because he laid the title and just disappeared. That's something big, but because it's Dolph Ziggler, you know how it ended up. Here's what he had to say about it in an interview back in 2018, and I quote, "So when I begged to go away for a long time, I wanted something special to happen. I wanted to go away, work on myself, make myself stronger, make my character better, using that entire process, and when I was inserted into the United States title match, I said, what can I do to make this match be more prestigious? How can I steal this title away from those two other superstars? And when I found a way, the reaction was there, but it wasn't quite what I wanted. I thought to myself as I got close to the ring, walk away and don't say a word. That will get everybody talking. That will be similar to going away for 3 months, going away for 6 months, going away for a year or two, as much as I can without giving up and breaching my contract. So I did what I could and I slammed that title down and I walked out. And that was the most anyone talked about me in 7 years, and I really wanted to capitalize on it. I felt special about it. There was the contract situation at the time where it's strongly believed he extended for $1.5 million a year. He offered his rebuttal to this saying it's not true, but who knows? But the whole situation was murky and very similar to the CM Punk one in 2011, except this time around, there wasn't much of a story surrounding it because this wasn't Roman Reigns or somebody like AJ Styles at the time. This man was expecting something huge, and I read some stuff from that time. Some people actually believed Ziggler would get a big push and potentially win the Royal Rumble. It was crazy. At the Royal Rumble, Dolph Ziggler made his return at number 30. He started off hot but quickly fizzled out and was eliminated. So it was all for nothing. This guy built up this storyline where he was complaining, whining, talking about how the fans don't appreciate him, wins the title, and tries to do something in spite of them and walk away. It was all for nothing, even though WWE had a great beginning, a great start to a big storyline. Then this guy started talking about main eventing WrestleMania and said he'll be damned if he doesn't walk in there with the WWE Championship. He got the title shot, but it was a multi-man match. Talking about how it's criminal he never had a title run. He didn't make good on his promise. Great match though, a nice combination of talent with AJ Styles going all out during this title reign. It was bound to deliver. Ziggler following WrestleMania formed a partnership with Drew McIntyre, and that's a different story. Overall, ever since Dolph Ziggler turned heel in 2017, they did not have a single plan for him. Nothing was going down. The whole thing he was complaining about the fans not appreciating him, mocking other wrestlers, that should have gone down differently. My personal opinion, if they were to go that route with Ziggler complaining and whatnot, he should have lost it at some point, complained a lot, threw a big fit, and go from there, because everything he did beforehand was almost pointless, especially because he just randomly returned and acted like nothing went down. It was stupid. But yeah, WWE didn't really push him hard because, number one, the contract situation, but they didn't even try to give him a reason to renew. They were like, here's the contract. He probably signed it. I don't know. I personally don't know the contract situation. But regardless, he remained. They did not care about him much. They did care about him in the summer with the IC title. That's a different story. But during his SmackDown run in 2017 and early 2018, they did not give a damn about him. Ziggler was a great performer, but once he turned heel in 2017, they just didn't care about him. He cared a bit, but he didn't care to leave, you know, because they were offering money. He's like, okay, whatever, I'm going to stay here. Did he like it? No, he literally says it in interviews that he doesn't really care or like much of the stories that he's had in the last couple of years. The way he's booked, he doesn't care much about it, but because he's getting paid all this money, it's like, okay, let's sit down, let's deal with it. That's not an issue to him. The whole mocking entrance thing was a strange one to me. It obviously makes sense because Ziggler was fed up with the way the fans were treating him, and he's seeing all these characters succeed, so he wanted to mock them and whatever. It made sense to me. It's just they didn't have a great follow-up to it. So yeah. Alright, what did you guys think of Dolph Ziggler 2017? Please comment down below, and that's the first video. Make sure you hit the famous around the like button, perhaps a zigzag on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.